thank you for joining me for my live chat. I'm really excited to be talking about a super important subject today, and that is how plant-based eating can feed resilience. And I have an expert with me today, Rhonda Spencer-Hwang. Hi, Rhonda. Thank you for joining me.
Nice to meet you, Sharon.
Yes. So Rhonda is from Loma Linda University. She's a professor and epidemiologist, and I graduated from nutrition at Loma Linda, so it has a special place in my heart. And we are going to be talking all about how your diet, how a plant-based diet can help you live a longer, more healthy, vibrant life, and some of the research in this area, which is really exciting. So just to give you a little background on Rhonda, as I mentioned, she's an associate professor at Loma Linda University, and she's also done groundbreaking research over the last 8 years on how habits of centenarians, people that live a long time, their diets make a big impact in their long lifespan. And this is despite the tremendous burden of hardships and challenges people face. Their diet is still making a big impact. So she has studied and published extensively in this area. So we're really lucky to have her today. And we can really ask some of these important questions on how diet can make an impact. Plus, Rhonda has a book out too. It's called Raising Resilient Kids. So welcome, Rhonda. We're really excited to have you here. And I just wanted to start off by asking you a little bit about how your journey started in this whole field of public health and nutrition.
Thank you, Sharon, for having me. And I'm so excited to share with all of the listeners. My journey is somewhat an unusual one. I'm an epidemiologist and professor, and I also had a number of grants from the government in First Five doing health promotion programs for children and their families. Well, meanwhile, my own life was very hectic, right? A career mom, and I have 3 kids. My youngest at the time was 1. And here I am running around. My purse was a buffet of snack food items and every electronic device under the sun, you name it, I had it. I just felt this heap of stress and guilt because of the choices we were making. My husband had been diagnosed with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, though we exercised every day pretty much. And, we tried to eat well, but our choices was not great. My son's, pediatrician said his weight is creeping up and my own cholesterol was starting to show signs of not being so healthy. So then I thought, I really want to do something different. We have people coming all over the world to see here in Loma Linda. We're this fountain of youth, this community of longevity. And so people are coming here and they call me up and want to say, can a film crew come and see in your house and see what your pantry looks like and how you live? It would take me a good week to prepare so that, we would have this look of, we know what it looks like. Yet part of me, I knew I needed to do better. And so finally I said to myself, why don't I just go and interview these centenarians and see what advice they have for families, especially for children, right? How should we be living different? And so that was the start of, I never imagined I'd be running around tracking down people who are over 100, and I never imagined at the time, this is 8 years ago, the pandemic was not even a thing. Physicians were wondering, why are you interviewing centenarians? What possible advice do they have for us? They lived 100 years ago, right? This is what they told me. And I said, no, in my gut, I have a feeling, I don't, divine intervention probably calling me to do this research and get ready. And and then to write it in a book. Moms were asking me, can you make it a book? So then I did. So that was my journey. And for me, it's life-changing. It's a different perspective and a different way of living and better health. Numbers are decreasing. And I have to say, happiness overall and joy in my household. We still have fights and with the kids, but it's a more peaceful time now that I've made the switch and living differently.
Yeah, I love that you brought up, as an expert in this area, that sometimes we have troubles and barriers in our own family lives, right? I mean, we face challenges just like everybody else does. And even though we may have all this knowledge about nutrition, as a dietitian, I have the same, issues in my life. sometimes it's harder to apply those at home. And we have things that we have to deal with and learn from, and realize how all of those challenges that it takes to eating healthy. So that's a really interesting aspect. Can you tell us a little bit more about this work, studying the centenarians, a little bit more about your research in that area?
So I decided I'm going to go out and we're going to do it like a full-on qualitative-based research study, not just, journalism, but actual research. Mm-hmm. So I had a team of volunteers join me. It was whoever wanted to meet centenarians, the students, some of my coworkers, whoever wanted to. We all went, put together our proposal, went through our own IRB at Loma Linda University, and then with a developed survey in hand, we went out and started locating centenarians. And we had no problem. From my previous job, I am an epidemiologist that track infectious disease. So I have no problem finding people, especially those who don't want to be found. I know how to track them. So granted, none of my centenarians, they're a different group than what I normally was tracking. So these guys are great. My husband, we started with my husband's aunt. She's the oldest in Loma Linda. At that time, she was 101. Now she's 108. And she at 101, she was still living independently. At 100, she was still driving her own car.
Wow.
The kids finally took the keys away and said, you fell in the garage one time. We want to make sure you're safe. But she said she was a little irritated and said, just need to get to church on Sabbath. I want to get my hair done on Friday. And if I had my own keys in my own way, you wouldn't have to stand over me, right? So it's been an amazing journey meeting these guys. They are everything you can imagine, from a surgeon, heart surgeon. Dr. Ellsworth was a heart surgeon, to one is a pathologist. She graduated medical school at a time when women weren't graduating medical school. She graduated here at Loma Linda, went into the mission field, experienced amazing things. We've had people who are world record setters, right? To just, even just a typical housewife or farmers or things like that, everything in between. So we had tape recorders in hand, we interviewed them, we transcribed the interviews, then we coded them, and we're looking for themes. What are those themes that are going to come out that look like what I call resiliency factors that likely whether offset any thing in their life? What I wasn't expecting was the trauma that endured. I thought in my mind, and most people probably think, right, to live 100, easy, right? You had to have a cake. That's what we think. And no, these guys are the first community that I see with signs of overcoming ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, where there's a death in the family, divorce, abuse in the family, violence. I mean, these guys, minimum ACE score was 4 for many of them. One had an ACE score of 6, and they say it should shorten your lifespan by 20 years if you have an ACE score of 6. Here she is at 108. Okay, so
wow, so that's what you talk about, overcoming challenges that are surprising.
Yeah, and not only that, think of the pandemic. They've been through the Spanish flu, the 1918 Spanish flu, right? And we're experiencing that, similar like that now. If you're worried of the economy, well, guess what? They've been through the Great Depression and what
exactly.
So their advice to me was more than, the resiliency factors. It was that they're overcomers. So I call them the world's, their resiliency capital. I think there's others in the world, and we're going to check. I'm checking right now to see, but this is the first one where a whole community not only live significantly longer, but do so overcoming trauma.
Did you look in the geographic location of Loma Linda for your research, for your cohort?
My research started here in Loma Linda, and then it spread out. So it is here, majority are in Loma Linda, but then we expanded it. It was Adventist in general. So we started going up north towards Washington and then towards Florida. So it is the Adventist community.
Right.
But in their childhood, one thing that was interesting to me was as children, they had a faith foundation. They weren't Adventists, all of them. So in their childhood, it was more of a Christian faith, not so much that they were Adventists. Later on throughout their life, they came to become, in the Adventist community, but as children, it was a faith foundation.
So did this overlap with the blue zones at all, or is it kind of a coincidence that that was kind of, that work, which, found Loma Linda to be one of the blue zones? How did that all align?
So this research started because people were coming to me and wanting, from around. So I started interviewing them just to see for myself what the centenarians would say for kids, right? What do we do for the kids? And people were coming and wanting to see in my pantry. I get calls from people. They want to know, they want to go on a tour of Loma Linda. And so kind of this combining of worlds, right? This longevity hotspot with what are my own practices really made me say, hey, I need to go see for moms. What is the advice that they would have? How should we be, raising our kids? A lifetime of resiliency. A lot of times it starts with in your childhood, those habits that you're making is so important. So that's why I decided, I got to go find out firsthand what they would tell families.
That's so exciting. And for those of you out there who might not have heard of the Blue Zones is this concept developed by Dan Buettner, who is a journalist who was on assignment to research and to explore these places around the world where people live the longest. And Loma Linda was the blue zone in the United States. So he discovered, through his journalism and investigations, that community, with some of the things that Rhonda's speaking about here, like, for example, the diet and this faith-based community and all these aspects were linked with longevity. But I really wanted to touch on something that you talked about, that it starts early. And I think a lot of times we're not really focusing on that when it comes to nutrition and health. A lot of times we think, oh, well, they're young, they can eat whatever they want. It's later they have to watch. But we're learning that that's not so true. Can you tell us a little bit about that aspect?
Yeah, so early on, you are planting those seeds of what they're going to be exposed to, what they're going to experience, how their palate in their mouth, right? How they're developing taste and what they'll be open to. The centenarians had it easier because they were poor. They didn't have options. Okay, so they were really poor, and so in their childhood, it was what they grew is what they ate. Right? That was it. So now we have many options. And so it's really more a conscious awakening of the parents that, kind of slowing down the pace of life so that we can make these choices to choose some of these things. Because sometimes we think we don't have, an option, but actually we have a plethora of options, more than what the centenarians had. And so it's really important. And one of the studies I looked at found among children who already are abused, even as kids, there is this level of inflammation that's creeping up in their body already in childhood, right? If there's divorce or there's trauma in the household. And so it's really important now. Scientists know that one of the keys to offsetting the damage of ACEs or potentially mitigating that damage is attacking that level of inflammation, right? So how do you do that? That inflammation in your body, it comes from everywhere, not only from stress. It's from air pollution, right? It's from the day-to-day, everything. Even the COVID pandemic, the virus itself created this, cytokine storm in your body. So it's really, how do you help your body to offset that? And that starts really in childhood, right? So if you have, especially for those that, if there is more adversity in childhood, the sooner they get, eating more like the centenarians, which is more plant-based, better you're potentially able to offset that inflammatory, which it's linked with a lot of things, right? Inflammation is heart disease, depression, the shortened lifespan,
cancer,
obesity, all of these things, right? This hallmark is one of the hallmarks related, all of them, is that level of inflammation in the body. More studies are needed to really look and see how these factors may offset that inflammation in the body, but there is hope, based on what the centenarians show us, there's hope.
Yeah, I really love what you said about, these people that grew, the centenarians lived during these periods of food shortages. Like my parents, my father just passed away at 89. My mother's still alive, but they grew up during World War II and the Depression. But they grew up on a farm. So they ate a plant-based diet because that's what you ate. I mean, they were the lucky ones because they grew up on a farm, so they had some food, like they were surrounded by food, but it was plant-based because that's all you could afford to really grow. It was animal foods were in short supply. So, it is interesting how that diet impacted their lives. And now we do have all these choices, and a lot of them aren't so healthy. I keep reading studies about the percentage of intakes in children's diets. It's made of junk foods, ultra processed foods, so it is definitely something to be concerned about. But I wanted to ask you a little bit. So as you're exploring the research in this area, were there any really big surprises that you discovered along the way?
Well, the big surprise to me was the trauma. I wasn't expecting that the ACEs and the level of trauma that they would have, that kind of threw me off for a loop. But then another surprise to me came when I decided okay, I want to make a survey so I see what their life looks like, right? And then I can compare my own life to what a centenarian would look like. That was really eye-opening. And so I include the survey in the book, and I encourage people to take the survey. If you want to know what resiliency looks like, well, you compare what you're doing with those people who have it the most. And that, yes, it's kind of like, it's a humbling experience, especially if you're in a public health profession, right? Or you're a registered dietitian, to see where these areas where you are, stellar at, and where you could use a little help. And so that's what I did. And it was really eye-opening. Of course, one of my hardest, I already knew, is food. And so one of the principles of the centenarians under the simple foods habit, basically it's simple foods, but no food on the fly. That was another thing I learned from them. Absolutely. And if you looked in my car, it's stocked like a mobile food unit. I've got napkins, straws, you name it, prepared. Because we're going to shove food down our kids while we are driving like a mad mom to whatever activity, right? So no food on the fly. That was when I really wanted to begin taking to heart and slowing down. And I know it's hard, but even starting one day a week where you gather at the table, right? You eat, we prepared at home, and gathering at the table. And I have a saying that I say to my kids is that hunger is not a requirement to come to the table, right? You don't have to be hungry to come, because there's more going on than just the feeding of the body. There's a feeding of the mind and the soul, and connecting with the family.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, go ahead, sorry. Yeah, there's just, and we know there's this body of work on family meals, the power of family meals, not even dependent on what you're serving, just the act of having a family meal has myriad benefits, from, emotional benefits to academic performance to, of course, nutrition benefits too. So I think, and I also love what you said about, no eating on the fly. And this is something, I raised my children in a period where it was, God forbid, that you let them be hungry for 1 second. You always had a bag of snacks, and they weren't always the healthiest snacks. And now I'm really more in tune to just letting them experience hunger. Like, do they even get to know what hunger is before they have food offered to them? And to realize that, and the way my mother raised me, and she lived on the farm during the Depression and World War II, is we were never allowed snacks. We had to wait for dinner. We would be starving, but then we ate, with a hearty appetite and slept well. And, so I do think we have some things to learn in that area.
I totally agree. One of the things that makes food taste much better is hunger, right?
Yeah.
So, you have to watch, and I know there's a good intention, but a lot of times the sports activities that my kids are involved, there is always a snack. And it's from whether they're the 5-year-old playing to even in high school. And I was thinking, after a sport, you don't have to give them a bag of chips and whatever. And by the way, the centenarians, the only option they had to drink was water.
Right.
There wasn't Gatorade. There wasn't, coconut water. It wasn't fused with anything. It was just,
it was tap water or well water. Yeah, I know. And we know the research shows that in particular beverages for children could be a big link, especially sugar sweetened beverages. So it really does go back to that beverage.
The school, I noticed a lot of the school offerings during the pandemic, right, is, I don't know why they don't give water, but what they're giving is chocolate milk or apple juice. And I thought, you know, especially during the pandemic, you need to be as strong as resilient as possible, right, to help your own self. But those dietary choices do make a difference. And there's a study in the British Medical Journal right now, the nutrition one, that looked at healthcare workers. Over 2,000 responded to a survey about their dietary patterns and then their experience with COVID. And what they're finding, it's significant, highly significant, though it's only one study. They need to replicate it. But what they're finding is those that eat a plant-based diet, less severe and moderately severe COVID. So they didn't study whether or not they got infected. What they were studying was the severity of the infection that they're reporting. And those that eat more plant-based diet, significantly less moderate and severe cases. So it really does.
And that really goes in my mind. Of course, I think of all the benefits of the plant-based diet, but I start thinking about the gut microbiome and those immunity benefits, because that fiber, you know, we only get fiber from plant foods, and your gut microbiome needs that fiber to be nourished and to have a diversity and a larger population of gut microbes. So what do you think is behind those benefits in addition to the gut microbiome?
Well, for me, one of the things I'm curious about is the overlap. I say the ease is in the overlap, the power is in a synergy. And what I mean by that is, I think that it's not only the benefit of the water and the time, so the time outdoors, growing their vegetable, right? They're exposed to things that even in nature, when you go out, they have studies showing they check your cortisol level, your stress and your inflammation drop within 10 minutes of just being outdoors. They call it forest bathing, right? So you have this attacking inflammation in your body, and then you have a plant-based diet helping to promote, reduce the inflammation and protect you. But then if you're doing other things as well with your hydration, which is also linked to your immune system, right? So all of these things are kind of building you this like life preserver, right? If you imagine and layers and layers to help offset the trauma and the damage. So I have a feeling, and getting back to the way the centenarians worked, from working the soil to grow their food to what they ate and eating it together, I think all of that, it magnifies the benefit. And we're going to start looking and seeing studies that show, look, there's what we call effect modification, where these things interact and they have even more protection, right, than if you just looked at, if you all you did one of those things. It's great, but missing the magnifying benefit. So I think that's the next steps in research, is really looking at the whole, right?
Holistic. Yeah, I agree with you, because when you look at the plant-based diet, it, like you just said, it has all of these factors. And then I think there's synergism that, they can actually add up to be more than the sum of their benefits. When we know that there's synergism in nature, where, when you have different phytochemicals together and you eat them in one source, you actually have, an additive benefit. So I think that there's so much exciting work in this area. And when you talk about like the fact that many centenarians were growing their own food, and my parents, as I mentioned, lived on a farm, they grew up on a farm, but because that was their lifestyle, even when we lived in the city or suburbs, we had large vegetable gardens. We grew a lot of our own food. And so that, I think that culture just sticks with you, and as you said, there are benefits to gardening, benefits to being outside, many benefits, not only like with, you're eating more vegetables. Studies show that when you grow food, you eat more of it. Your children will eat more of it if they're involved with growing food. So, but then also these stress levels and these other benefits. So that was one thing I wanted to ask you a little bit about is, we've talked about some of the habits of the centenarians, the fact that they grew their own food, that they ate more simple food, none of this food on the fly type thing. Were there other, things that you really teased out, like other traits or characters in their lifestyle or diet that you think were significant?
I think that, the Keystone habit, the one that's like their keystone and really influences a lot of the others when they were kids, right? is that time in nature. So
Mm-hmm.
outdoors, time in nature, from growing, they had growing their own food to, if they had to go somewhere, they walked, right? So,
Yes.
and they wouldn't blink an eye. To get to school, it would take them an hour. And
Right.
one of them would get up at 4:30 a.m. to milk the cows. And mind you, they didn't have electricity. So
Mhm.
everything took twice as long. If we think of, growing a garden, we think of ordering the seeds. Okay, we've got, maybe a rototiller. They had not that. It was
Right.
very demanding, right? Very different. So I think even, from using our own feet, like thinking back, okay, how can we simplify our life? Like if you
Mm-hmm.
decide to plant a garden or, start walking more, walking to share
Mm-hmm.
your vegetables or whatever you may have, starting to simplify things. But so that their keystone habit was time in nature. And it was very, outdoors, helping one another,
Mm-hmm.
very community, right? Like if they had to help one another on the farms. If a fence fell down, they had to help each other. I think we've kind of lost that way with,
Mm-hmm.
our today. Today is like very hectic, fast paced. There is this feeling amongst parents of intense pressures to compete, right? And you see parents doing all kinds of kind of things, from helicopter parenting to bubble wrap parenting to even I call it the orange jumpsuit parenting, where they'll be willing to make choices that line end them up in jail, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they're probably very well-meaning parents. They want their kids to succeed, but it's at what cost, right? And so really taking a step back. And one of the things I encourage parents to do is, if you want to make a change, right, first do a time study of your life, right? Just sit
Mm-hmm.
down, take 1 week or write down what you're doing, what you're eating, and who you're with, right? And then I say, call in one day, take a half a day off from work because it's a sick day. You really, most of us really are sick. We just can't
Yeah.
see it, right? There's this level inside of you. So I say, take a half sick day and start to evaluate your time diary. Is it how you imagine your life to be, right? Is it really
Mm-hmm.
fulfilling? If you look at this, does it bring you joy? Does it make you happy to see you or your family live this way, right? Is this what you wanted? And if the answer is no, I want to make changes, well, then you have to start right then and there. And part of me, I prayed and was asking God for guidance that to help me make my family
Mm-hmm.
stronger. But then take the survey in the book and see which resiliency factor, you're kind of low in. And the book
Mm-hmm.
walks you through a step-by-step program of, okay, let's try these things. And keep in mind, some things you're going to do well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Things you're going to get, not a problem. And then others, you're going to need help. And so I say, use your strengths to bolster up the areas that need. If you don't like to garden, maybe you could, but you like to walk. Maybe you could walk to, a stand or walk to the store to get, I say,
Mm-hmm.
get the fruit that rot, get the food that rots,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Get the food that rots, pick up the food
Mhm.
that your grandma or your great grandma would recognize. If they
Yes.
don't fill your cart with those things, right? Like try to
Yeah.
get the stuff that rots, but
Perishable things. Yeah.
that's it. And then, it's a journey. You try and you start, and some days you're going to succeed and other days not, but it's a journey, and it's one where you can give yourself the gift of time, right? If the healthier you are, the longer hopefully you'll be here. It's being a positive influence in your kids, right?
Yeah. And by the way, be sure to check out the blog that goes along with our live chat, because I have all of these notes in the show notes. I have Rhonda's book, Raising Resilient Kids. I have information on where you can get that, where you can see it, and some of the other information that we've been talking about today. So go check out SharonPalmer.com to get the full notes of this live chat. So do you have any other tips for families when it comes to, you were just giving some great advice, like for example, choose foods that rot, like to me, that's just getting away from all those packaged prepared foods and getting back to those whole foods that you can. I always like to say that when you pick them up, you can actually see how they were grown, how they're close to the earth. When you eat an apple, you can see a stem and you can think, oh yeah, the stem is where it was attached to the tree. So it's close to the earth, So do you have any other tips for families as they're trying to shift to this healthier plant-based lifestyle for, for their kids?
Yeah, definitely. For me, I'm like, I had a fear of the kitchen. So that's kind of my background. I didn't grow up, cooking. So I said, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to do this. I mean, I would burn rice or do what, burn toast, burn rice, you name it, I'd burn it. And my kids would always tell me, you're chopped from the cooking, right? Chopped. So they tell me. So I started ordering, and it is somewhat expensive. You can shop around and see, but I started getting those meal kits like Blue Apron, HelloFresh, some of those, because they have pictures of what the items, they have all the items bought for you, and then pictures of what it should look like. And it's simple skills. So I could start making that. And after doing that for about a year, I really feel good about the skills that I'm learning. So that was kind of from the box. I supplement because I have teenagers now. So the box doesn't cover all of our family needs. So we supplement. And we pick the plant-based or fish. Sometimes we'll eat the fish, but it's really helped me to gain skills of what things are called, different, I can't even, different spices that you can use and things like that. So it's given me a lot of confidence to go out now and shop and, try new recipes that I see. So that's what I recommend. And my centenarian friends, they had some good, easy things to tell me to do. So yeah, that's where I would recommend.
Are there any tips that you would have as it pertains to what's going on today, like, facing pandemics, when we have these stresses that you were just kind of talking about, centenarians have had to go through these stresses. When we put that into the picture, like economic issues and, even climate change, do you have tips on how families can help build resistance into their lifestyle when it comes to the barriers that we're facing today?
Yeah, one is around the food, how you stock your pantry. I learned this early on. My pantry was a mess, if you saw my pantry. But even before, so I started realizing slow and simpler is better, their way. And before I knew it, I was baking bread. Well, and my pantry was stocked, like I call it a pantry stock for pandemic or for whatever is going to come. And lo and behold, you couldn't get things when the pandemic hit. Who knew you would not be able to get yeast, right? Everybody wanted it. So by going through this journey, I was already prepared of, this is how your pantry should look. This is how your fridge should look. This is what you keep on your countertop. So that way, when these bad times hit. And then the other tip one of them gave me was, one is connecting with family, really connecting with family and friends, because they're going to be the ones that are going to help you weather the storms, especially. Right? And you got to build that connection. But another great tip they gave was not a life of excess, right? So if you're always purchasing things that are nice to have versus the needs to have, you end up filling up your house, you end up filling up your life, you end up having to work more to be able to pay for those things. So they really taught me the value of simpler and slower, right? If you take time with the family to go somewhere, do you need all of this equipment and everything, like camping, right? Do you need all of that or something simpler, better way? And also too, if you aren't filling up your schedules, like be forewarned, when the pandemic, it's going to go like this, right? It's going to wax and wane. And as things slow, as the pandemic starts to come to a slow, things are going to open up. And I want to warn everybody, you're going to have this feeling like you lost a year. We lost a year and a half. How do we get back and get even busier? Because by golly, we lost a year, right? People are already feeling this way. And there's going to be this urge to, even for yourself, for your family, you triple book. You're going to be more booked than any airlines possible. You are just going to be, and if one thing falls off, you'll say, not a problem. I've got 3 more things waiting in its place. Don't do that, right? Don't resist the urge, slow and steady, because you're going to overwhelm yourself and you put yourself at risk for other illnesses as well, right? So protect your schedule. It shouldn't be jam-packed, because when you jam-pack, you don't have time for, cooking or making or sitting down to the table, right? So really starts with your schedule. Take a look and see triple booked and it's not healthy. You have to cut it. You have to cut it back, and you're going to still succeed. Don't you worry. And in fact, when you have some of that more free time, that's when some of the best memories are made. It's like you didn't plan something and you're down with the kids and all of a sudden you're playing this board game and it becomes one of their cherished childhood memories, right?
Yeah.
Overbook.
That's so important. I love that. And I think that the pandemic taught us that to live that simpler life. And if we can kind of take some of that with us and move forward, I love that. And we know that's better for, for the environment when we're purchasing less items, we're reusing more items. Just having a simpler life is so good for us. So that's a really great way to end this. And I just wanted to encourage everybody to go check out Rhonda's book, Raising Resilient Kids, and check out the blog that goes with our chat at SharonPalmer.com. And I'm also going to be sharing one of her favorite recipes. It is a butternut squash enchilada recipe. So that's going to be on the blog too. So check it out. Thank you so much for joining us, Rhonda. It was really great talking with you. And you had so much great advice on how to raise resilient kids and families.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for having me. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Bye.